my name is Zari Karimi, and it's my pleasure to present an extremely talented and multi-dimensional young lady as our MC this afternoon. And it is my honor to introduce Sheila Shah. Sheila is an accomplished producer and international actress with a deep background and passion for charitable causes. She's an advocate and humanitarian who speaks fluently of Farsi, Persian, Persian and French and English. And she has joined as an ambassador for White Ribbon USA, which is an organization which helps women and children against violence. She is also an ambassador for March of Dimes in Canada, as well as an advocate for CARE, the organization to fight poverty through empowerment of women and girls. I applaud you for that. Sheila holds a bachelor degree in chemistry, a post-grad degree in pharmaceutical regulatory affairs, and subsequently worked in pharmaceutical industry in both Toronto and Miami. If that's not enough, she has also fulfilled a passion for earning an Associate of Art degree in merchandise marketing from the Fashion Institute of Design and Merchandising. Please join me to welcome our MC for today, Sheila Shah. Thank you.
Thank you. It's truly an honor to be here and to host this wonderful event. I would like to say a few words about the foundation. Cancer Research and Life Foundation, also known as CRL Foundation, was founded in 2016. CRL Foundation is a public 501(c)(3). It's focused on integrative medicine and the application of natural therapies in terminal patients with cancer. CRL has been an advocate for cancer research and cutting edge since its establishment in 2016. In the past few years, CRL Foundation has supported the discovery of a novel therapy based on solely natural compounds to treat terminal cancer. These natural compounds are extremely safe and effective, but unfortunately not available at other cancer institutions such as Hope, City of Hope, and many others. With the support of our donors, in the past, the CRL has been able to provide financial grants to over 100 patients in the US and abroad to have access to this life-saving treatments for those suffering from cancer. Patients who are some here with us today are a living example of success using translational science through our dedicated team of scientists and research who work very closely with the foundation. Cancer. Hearing the word from a doctor could be terrifying, and the impact, life-changing. The prospect of enduring cancer treatment, its associated side effects, and the unnecessary uncertainty of the outcome are overwhelming, but there is hope. Our mission here is to improve patients' response and quality of life while receiving cancer therapies both in conventional and or research settings. The Cancer Research and Life Foundation is unique in providing cancer patients with immediate help wherever they are in their journey by providing education and guidance and access to research-based treatments and beyond. That is why every patient who seeks our foundation help finds a meaningful solution in an otherwise world of hopelessness. We have 5 goals to be accomplished within the next 5 years, and I'll go through all the 5 goals for you. The first one is educating cancer care providers through precision oncology. As you all very well know, there are currently many foundations that promote either researching cancer or supporting cancer patients by providing educational tools and therapies. Many of those foundations, including American Cancer Society and Lymphoma Leukemia Society, raise hundreds of millions of dollars what CRL Foundation does differently. First and foremost, educating the providers about 90% of what appears to be effective in treating patients with cancer filters out before it gets to the hands of the patients. In other words, there is a lack of a system that could translate science into the clinics. Goal number 2 would be to educate public and providers about options of care to a patient with advanced cancer. This goal of educating the oncologist is planned to be executed by establishment of a multidisciplinary fellowship program that is pending CME approval. Patients should be educated about the options they have through lectures and conferences. Goal number 3 is improving patients' quality of life and improving patients' emotional burden. As you all very well know, patients' awareness to the therapies that are customized for their care is very important, and also to be able to cover patients' care. Goal number 4 would be cancer rehabilitation facilities. We would want to establish a facility as a cancer nursing home so patients without sources of housing and support could be accommodated. And our last goal, but not least, preventive oncology. To provide genetic testing and screening for patients, relatives, and families at risk. Provide preventive measures to normal individuals at significant risk, and to support the establishment of an insurance policy that could cover the enrolled individuals for the rest of their lives by providing tools which could significantly reduce their risk of cancer based on their genes. Ultimately, with better services to the patients and expansion of their quality and quantity of life, we can also reduce the cost of care in the healthcare system and have a more productive and healthy society. At this point, I wanna, on behalf of the foundation, I would love to thank you all for being here and for your generosity and support. Without your kindness, we would not be able to save and change lives every day. Please use the donation box to deposit your donation before leaving, and any donation at any size is much appreciated. Also, please check out the silence auction. We have about 20 different auctions from local businesses, and all the proceeds do go back to the foundation. On behalf of the foundation, we want to thank you again for your generosity. At this point, I'd like to invite our first patient to say a few words, Julie Ertl, who is currently under the care of Dr. Nezami. Please help me welcome Julie Ertl.
My husband Scott is going to speak first, as Dr. Nezami asked him at the last minute to speak. So he's going to start off.
Thank you all for being here. Thank you, Dr. Nezami, for inviting us to this event and for all you've done for us. I wanted to tell our story a little bit. I'm going to try to be fairly brief, but I need to go back in time a little bit to kind of set things up. Back in 2008, we were living in Huntington Beach. I was working for a company in Anaheim in product management. And as the recession started setting in late in 2008, the company I worked for closed a couple divisions, including the one that I was working for. So as of Halloween of 2008, I was laid off from my job. Spent the next 2.5 years looking for work, doing some consulting here and there on the side. And over that time decided that what I really wanted to do was to go back to school, get my degree in engineering, and reorient my career. So beginning in 2012, January 2012, moved to Central Arizona, started back as a full-time student at 42 years of age, and really trying to set ourselves up for the future course for our family. A month into my schooling, Julie was diagnosed with stage 2 breast cancer. As a full-time student, we had no health insurance. Obviously, this was not part of our plans. We had sold our house in Huntington Beach and had budgeted that money for the 2.5 years it was going to take for me to get my degree. figured that we could support our family over that time. Oncology bills had not been factored into that amount, obviously. So we felt very strongly that we wanted to look at alternative and integrative care for a number of reasons. I won't get into those at the moment, but Julie did some treatment down in Phoenix, some insulin potentiation therapy, responded very well, although it was expensive and did end up leading to a fair bit of debt for us. But she responded well, we thought she was healthy. One of the challenges when you're pursuing alternative and integrative care is you're kind of, you're kind of finding your own path, making the best decisions you can. Without medical training, sometimes those decisions are insufficient, as this turned out to be, because we found out in 2016, not only was the cancer back, but it had metastasized pretty much everywhere. As a early career engineer in my second career, I was again supporting the family, but just barely. We were having to live skinny as it was, and so looking for options for healthcare again was a challenge. We didn't want to go traditional oncology, and 2 years ago now, almost 2 years ago to the day, we found Dr. Nezami. Julie had been bedridden for months. She had what turned out to be a pathologic fracture in her hip, so was completely non-ambulatory, had been in bed for 3 months or so straight. So I wheeled her into his office in a wheelchair. He looked at the scans, MRIs, lab work, and told us that he was going to do what he could for us. At that point in time, as I said, she had cancer in her breast, her bones, her brain, her lungs, her liver, and the other doctors were just looking at her test results and kind of shaking their head, saying there's nothing we can do. Dr. Nezami assured us, he said, they don't know what I can do. So 2 years ago, as of this coming Thursday, she actually had a hip replacement surgery. Was a very high-risk surgery. The surgeon told us there was a very significant chance she wouldn't make it off the table. She's a very determined lady, I can testify, through 27 years of marriage. And she said, you know what, I'm not going anywhere. We started through Dr. Nezami's regimen of care. What I can say is we saw the miraculous. I mean, Dr. Nezami almost literally reached down into the grave and pulled Julie out and set her back on her feet. As I said, she had been bedridden, and you can see today, not only is she alive, but she is living her life. She has her quality of life back. She can do just about anything that she wants. And for months, she sat in that bed and she said, I'm not okay with this being the end. I'm still in my 40s. I have a lot of things I still want to do. I want to see my kids get married. I want to hold my grandbabies on my lap. And what I can say is a week ago yesterday, we married our daughter. And Julie planned and set up the wedding. She was amazing. November of this year, 4 months from now, our son's going to get married. And the 15-year-old we still have at home is in no hurry. So, the MTET therapy has been miraculous. Again, traditional oncology had no solution for us. There was nothing they could do. They basically said, we can plug her in and pump her full of stuff, but there's really nothing we can do to help. And Dr. Nezami was a ray of hope. And when you're in such a dark place, you'll grasp at whatever hope may be there. But what I can say is he fulfilled the hope that he offered us. Having hope in the name of his clinic is very appropriate. been the navigator that we needed to help us find our way through this journey, connect us with other doctors, with other treatments. He's been remarkably generous with his time, with his care, with his wisdom. And the clinic has been, and the foundation, I should say, has been remarkably generous with their resources as well. Julie's been a recipient of financial care from the clinic to the tune of tens of thousands of dollars, and that's been immeasurable in allowing her to be standing here today. Again, we've been working out of debt situations from her treatment, 5 years ago, 6, 7 years ago. Again, I was early career in my engineering career, not bringing in a lot, and we've gone to significant financial sacrifice ourselves. My 15-year-old, we spent his college fund on her care. Last year alone, I withdrew over $50,000 from my retirement account for her care. And the fact that she's standing here, it's worth every penny. But again, those resources only go so deep. And we're able to stand here because of the generosity of others. And we have a deep faith. Our faith has been such a key part of this journey for us. And there were those times where we just cried out and said, why God? Why are we here? And now we're still asking that question, but it's from the other side, saying when so many succumb to this horrible disease, why are we here? Why are we able to tell our story of overcoming, of strength, of perseverance, when so many can't? And that's what this foundation offers, is the opportunity to stand here and say, cancer didn't defeat us. It's not bigger than we are. If we all work together, if we care for one another, if we reach out. This disease touches millions of lives. It takes hundreds of thousands of people every year. And every one of those people deserves the opportunity to stand here and tell their story as well of how cancer didn't beat them. So speaking as somebody who's been touched by Dr. Nezami, by the foundation, I just want to say thank you. This has been life-saving, life-changing. Again, as parents of 3 kids, there have been a lot of challenges, a lot of trying times, and the support we received, the personal touch we received, has made all the difference. And so I just want to thank the foundation. I want to thank the individuals involved for your ridiculous generosity. But our journey's not at its end yet, and the journey of so many others not at its end yet. So thank you for the work the foundation's doing. Thank you for those that have so generously supported the foundation. And again, I just wanted to share our story, how we've been touched. One story of many, but thank you for your continued support as well.
I'm gonna have to adjust this a little bit here. I just kind of wanted to speak from personal experience and how this whole journey has felt for me. To have to tell your 3 children that you have cancer is probably the worst thing I've ever had to do in my life. And to have them be afraid and have them not know what's going to happen, and myself saying, no, I there needs to be more. I want more. And most of my journey has been seeking out the why, which no one could tell me why. Doctors couldn't tell me why I was sick. And I went through the whole journey of diets and eliminating products and all these things that society and everyone was telling me, if you do this, you're going to get well. And so many of those things were a source of bondage to me. I was afraid to eat anything. I was afraid to touch anything or use anything. And I think that was the biggest thing when my husband wheeled me in to Dr. Nezami, and I sat at his desk, and he offered me hope. I knew it was bad because of the pain that I was in, and I had to have care 24/7. I couldn't take care of myself. I couldn't even go to the restroom by myself because I couldn't walk. And for him to sit there and tell me, I'm going to take care of you, and you can let go of all the supplements and all the diets and all of those things because my treatment will help you no matter what. And it was so freeing to me, and the hope that I received from him was immense. And I tend to not want to draw attention to myself, but I actually had to leave his office in an ambulance because we realized during my second treatment that something was really wrong with my hip, like the pain. He said, your pain is bad, you need to go to the hospital. And so we had this dramatic thing, you know, the EMTs come in and they take me out of the stretcher. And after all of it's over and I end up back in the clinic, one of the patients goes, oh, I know who you are. You're the one that left in the ambulance. And I'm thinking, oh, what an impression to leave. But after undergoing the surgery, I had to stay in a care facility for rehab, and it was awful. It was an awful experience being so young, being in a nursing home, basically. I loved the staff there. They were wonderful. I just hated being there. And I thought, how long can I lay in this bed and just get well? I couldn't do it. And I said, can I take a wheelchair van to Dr. Nezami's every day? And the facility was like, of course, you can do whatever you want. So we hired a wheelchair van to take me every day for at least a month. And that's when I started the treatment because I didn't want to wait. I was like, I don't have time to sit here and wait. And Dr. Nezami visited me in the hospital when I had surgery. He fought with the doctors out in the hallway saying, no, they don't want to do this. You take care of her here and I'll take care of her after. He came to my care facility and just encouraged me. I felt like a person with a family that mattered to him, not just some number that he could take or leave. And I'm sorry, that's how I felt with every traditional doctor I was with. I just felt like a number. And I have always felt like my life was important to Dr. Nezami. And there's nothing greater than that when you're that sick. In the process, every time he would come in, my numbers were dropping by half. And he was like, look at these numbers, look at them every time. He was so excited. And I was still so sick that I was like, cool, great. I don't really know what that means, but you're happy, so great. And it just kept happening. I moved from the wheelchair to a walker, and then I moved from a walker to a cane, and now as you see, I don't need a cane. And you might have thought, oh, look, that poor woman, she's got a limp. And I'm like, oh no, this is great. Where I am right now is great. And I have never heard of anyone coming from the place I was with bone cancer, with fractures, all this awful stuff coming back. I don't know. Has anyone heard of that? I haven't heard of it. And so my life is a miracle, and this foundation has been so generous to us, and they continue to help when we run into problems. Sorry, we maxed out our credit card again. Can you go? And it's just, it's been phenomenal. But I need this to continue to live. I need these treatments to continue on this path. And so we're just praying. We're praying for help, that God will provide what we need so I can keep accomplishing the purpose that I have here, so I can keep being a mom. Marrying my daughter off this weekend, it was a celebration with so many things that I was here. I was here to see it, and the joy in her heart is just, it's just indescribable. So as you see, I'm pretty much completely recovered. I still have active cancer. We're still treating it, but it's not like it was. And sometimes I can't believe where I've come from. So if you need any motivation to get involved with this, I hope that my story will help you, decide this is something to get behind. This is a big deal, and more people need to have access to this. So that's my story. We love Dr. Nezami. We love the foundation, and
this needs to be the beginning of a revolution.
Yes.
In oncology. This needs to change the face of the way we treat cancer. Again, it's personalized, it's targeted, it's specific, and it's effective. And it doesn't destroy the body in the process of trying to shrink tumors. I mean, we had a doctor look at us 7 years ago and said, well, my job is to shrink tumors, that's what I do. And talk about feeling insignificant in front of your doctor. This needs to be the beginning of something that just takes over. So.
Thank you.
I would like to introduce to you the incomparable Dr. Nezami, the man behind this incredible cancer treatment, sometimes known as the miracle worker. Dr. Nezami has completed an internship at USC and has done his residency at UCSF. Being in practice for 23 years, he is currently the president of Orange Coast Medical Center of Hope, Sahel Oncology in California. National and international speaker in epigenetic science, has over 50 publications in peer-reviewed journals of oncology, author and co-author of Precision Oncology, Annals of Oncology, and many others. He is an investigator for Best Case Series by National Institute of Health and National Cancer Institute, the speaker of Caris Life Science and Oncology, and peer review expert in multidisciplinary scientific journals such as Biology and Medicine, Science International, Asian Journal of Medicine and Health, and many more. Chair of Oncology and Neuro-Oncology for several international annual conferences. His main area of interest is customized oncology and epigenetics. Currently has 34 patents globally and teaches, consults, and is extremely involved in research. He is leading the way for several clinical trials in the treatment of advanced and refractory cancer. Please join me to welcome Dr. Nezami.
Thank you very much. After the introduction, I felt so old. 23 years in practice, that's true. Anyways, so with all that credible background, all I can say is that I'm just a good guy that looks after what patients' needs are, depending on what the stage of disease they have and what we can do to basically offer a better life for them. That's my best description of past privileges and honors that I've had, more than any sort of certifications from UCSF or USC or whatnot. Anyways, sometimes patients ask me, how much of what you do have you learned through your trainings? And I tell them none, because what I do is pretty much is based on my own philosophy of care and not what I was taught in the schools of medicine, unfortunately. But I'll give you a little bit background on what is very unfortunate when it comes to standard of care and what is practiced in mainstream oncology. We had an oncologist, a pediatric oncologist in the audience that she just left, but many of my colleagues unfortunately have closed the doors when it comes to connecting with the patient. And I would give the most credit of my success to that element when it comes to providing care to a patient with cancer, is to connect with the patient. And as long as that connection exists, any provider, I think, as a human being, can try his best to bring new solutions. But unfortunately, as we all agree, there is not much connection when it comes to a patient with cancer and their provider. And that's something that I think our foundation is trying to build a sort of a training program for other oncologists, that they can train not only about the biology of cancer, but more than anything about how can they change their perspectives about treating a patient with cancer. I had this discussion earlier with one of the people. I said, you know, we have very good success in treating cancer in the laboratory. Almost any drug we use works when you treat cancer cells in the lab. And because we have PhDs from UCI here, I say that because they do a lot of that. But, and sometimes it translates to somewhat success in animal models. You know, I've worked for a good 2 years with MD Anderson Experimental Therapeutic Program, and so I'm quite familiar with the models that they use in the laboratory. And even in patient-derived xenografts, when they take the tumor out of the person and they implant it into the mice, and then they treat the mice with different sort of drugs, it works. But when it comes to human, when they treat with the same drugs and the same cancer, it fails. So why does this happen? Why is it that drugs fail when they try to use them in human? And I think part of it is because the concept of treating tumor and the concept of treating cancer are different. Because cancer is a disease that happens in human, and tumor is a symptom of the same disease that can happen in the lab, in a human, and in mice. In other words, we may be very successful to eradicate the tumor, but the cancer, no. And there is a lot of scientific merits into finding why does this happen, why is it that we fail treating patients, but we have good success in other models. And the main thing is that the cancer is supported by the human body. In other words, the stroma, the host, supports the cancer, versus there's no support when it comes to the lab. The cells grow on their own. And what our therapy does specifically is that it disconnects that support, meaning that it disconnects the coordination and the harmony that exists between the host, the patient's body, and the tumor. That's why we're successful in treating cancer beyond tumor. And so there is a very interesting movie I encourage everybody to watch. It's called The Physician, T-H-E, The Physician. And this movie is about Avicenna. You've seen it. Yeah. And I was very interested, you know, the whole Persian culture that I'm so proud of being one, comes from, obviously, the first physician that was there, Avicenna, in Iran. And many of the scientists all across the world will travel to Iran, in that specific part that Avicenna lived, and they made amazingly difficult trips all across the Europe to get to Iran to see this guy. Who's this Avicenna? Dr. Nezami of the time. And so they would go there, thank you. They would go there, and that was a joke. They would go there and And this guy was a genius because he was treating diseases based on treating the patient who has the disease. And in one part in this movie, they're trying to treat an eye problem, I believe, and the other scientists from UK and other places, they were trying to use drugs for the eye, and then he says, let's wait. Let's think about this eye that is not out there walking by itself. This is an eye inside a human body, and perhaps when you want to treat that eye, you gotta treat that person who has the eye. And it's true now, we know that many of the eye diseases are symptoms of systemic diseases. Many of the autoimmune diseases, they have optimal eye manifestations, or ophthalmic diseases that are related to a systemic problem. So anyways, that sort of holistic look, that when a patient comes, you're treating that patient who has cancer. That changes the dynamics, and that's why our treatment is so successful, as I explained, is because we treat the cancer not as a disease, but as part of aberrancy in a physiological growth and development process that needs to be corrected. So the whole concept of stem cells and epigenetics, as you know my lecture is about, is new because we didn't know anything about the stem cells up until 2005 or 6, and then we realized, oh, there's something called mother cells that are producing cancer, daughter cells, which is tumor. And when you look at the scan and you see that there is disease in a scan, so you are looking at the tumor, but you don't see anything behind the scene, which is stem cells or mother cells. So all the efforts since 1945 that the first chemotherapy agent, meclorethamine, came to the market, accidentally after mustard gas was used in battlefields in the World War, well, they saw that some of these leukemic soldiers, they didn't die, they got better, so they realized there is value in mustard gas that they were using for killing soldiers. The whole concept since then has been around killing the tumor, and not what is behind the scene, or the mother cells or stem cells. Until 2005 and 6, and we realized, oh, there's something called the stem cells, and these are the best cells that the body carries. And by the way, when you see a normal, healthy, otherwise healthy individual who has cancer, you scratch your head, what happened? This person is quite healthy. Well, cancer is made from those healthy cells, and that's why I don't call it a disease, because these stem cells are mother cells. They're very healthy. In fact, they're doing something that they're supposed to do perfectly, which is regeneration and repair areas of damage. Now, I always give this example to my patients once in a while when they say, why did I get cancer? And I tell them, the stem cells or these mother cells are doing something that they're supposed to do. And in fact, the reason that you are having cancer is because you're very healthy. And this healthiness is just too much. I always give this example of going to church, which is great if you do it every week. But what if you go to church every day and every night and you cannot come out of church? Then that's sickness, right? You gotta have to live too. You can't just live in the church, or they call it fanatics or radicals or whatnot in every other religion. So that's exactly what happens to these stem cells, which is producing new daughter cells and repairing the areas of damage, but in an uncontrolled way, meaning that they don't stop what is supposed to happen, and they produce and produce and produce and produce, and you get a tumor. So all you have to do is turn down or modify the behavior of these stem cells, called plasticity of the stem cells, first described in 2012 at MIT when I was there talking to the French scientists who were, for the first time, using treatments for cancer stem cells. The problem with conventional medicine is that we cannot change behavior of anything. When it comes to drugs, it's all about killing. So killing by surgery, killing by radiation, killing by chemotherapy, nothing changed behavior, and is as if you want, I like examples, as if you want to say, okay, we got terrorists, let's go bomb the area. Well, it's not going to take care of the problem because their leaders, cancer stem cells, are not there. So they're going to repopulate in another area. So by killing, you cannot modify. You have to change the behavior of the cells. So what MTET does, multi-targeted epigenetic therapy, is exactly that. It turns down the stemness of these cancer stem cells, or basically their plasticity. It differentiates them to different sort of colonies and make them commit to certain lineages of the cells that are less immortal. Anyways, I don't want to give you a lot of scientific headache, but I was asked to give a lot of medical scientific information because I guess they're trying to use this also for educational purposes. But anyways, I have so much to talk about. Yeah, so watch the movie. Avicenna is very interesting, The Physician. So when a patient comes to my practice, this is what I tell them. I tell them that there are things that I know and there are things that I don't know. But one thing that they will always hear from me is honest opinion. Meaning that if I don't know, I tell them I don't know. And I'm not embarrassed about saying I don't know. And it's funny because sometimes that's the best answer you can give a patient. And unfortunately, that's again missed in the conventional medicine because they always say, oh, we got it covered, and if you do this, you're gonna be fine. All this false hope that comes with use of conventional treatments. You know, I just had a 23-year-old guy with a testicular cancer. You know, chemotherapy works 4% at a time, I admit that. So 96% at a time is a failure. But guess what? That 4% is testicular cancer, first round to ovarian cancer, after it fails, and sometimes lymphomas. That's 4%, okay? Now this guy had testicular cancer, so he was one of those 4% that is supposed to respond to chemotherapy, right? And so he goes to the oncologist and they say, oh, you got testicular, we got it covered. It's 100% successful. If you do this, you're gonna be fine. Well, 4 months later, the same physician who told this person that if you do this, you're gonna be fine, and it's 100% success because testicular cancer supposedly responds to chemotherapy best, comes and says, I'm sorry, but we got no treatment for you. You've exhausted chemotherapy, it didn't work, and you have 2 months max to live. And this guy is 32 years old. So if you ask me, this is my expert opinion, if this person would have not done anything, meaning that if he would have just sat down on his couch in Salt Lake City and done nothing, he would have been among us now. But he passed away last week because of what is consisted of the third cause of death in the United States. Do you know what that is? Appropriately prescribed medications. I'm not talking about malpractice. I'm talking about appropriately prescribed medications. It's the third cause of death in this country. And so chemotherapy was getting the most of that, I believe, for taking away people's lives. And so 4 months later, they said it's done. Okay. Few days ago, talking about honesty, talking about connecting with the patient. That's what is missed, is that this oncologist was not honest to his patient, didn't tell that, you know, maybe it doesn't work. So I have patients who come to my office and they ask me, doctor, what's gonna be my prognosis? What's gonna happen to me? And I tell them, I don't know. And then they would say, what's my chances that if I use your treatment, I'll be around 6 months? I said, I don't know. He said, well, what is my chances if I do chemotherapy or surgery? I said, I don't know. Every question they ask, I tell them, I don't know. I literally had a patient just like that with lung cancer that every question he asked, I didn't know the answer. But what I said was that I don't know at this time, but I have to investigate, do the labs, find out where you are based on the genomic information, and then I can have a more meaningful conversation with you. And this patient looked at me and he said, so you don't know any of these answers? I went to my oncologist and said, do this, you're gonna be fine. I went to surgeon, he said, let me remove this, you're gonna be fine. And every question I asked you, you said, I don't know. You said, I don't know if you're gonna respond to my treatment, I don't know. I love it. I love it when you say you don't know, because it means you're damn thinking. And the other guys are not even thinking. They tell me, oh, you're gonna be fine, just do this. So if I'm a patient, I expect my physician to think, at least, right? And if that is missing, if you go to see a physician, and this physician doesn't even know your name, has to look at the chart to find out who the hell you are, there's a problem with the system. And I don't need to say this to many of you because I'm sure you've been through it. So now let's talk about science. We can go on and on about science, but I had to just start with an introduction of why people like me, why I think I'm different, because I look genius when everybody else is fool. And so, I'm not that genius anyways. So we really like to have you guys as messengers of the truth, the messengers about the cancer is not a death sentence. You know, in the modules that I have collectively worked on, first one is changing the provider, the oncologist concept about treating a patient with a stage 4 cancer, because everything depends on that. If you go to an oncologist and the first thing comes out of their mouth is that you have this much to live, please step out from that office. Because even me, with all miracles that I have, somebody said, do you have a rabbit in your pocket that you can take it out? I probably can. But even me, I cannot tell a patient how long they can live. It's not up to me, okay? It's not up to us. And there's a lot of examples of that. I can tell you that my patients that I taught, they can live tens of years. They died in a matter of months. And the patients that they were supposed to die in a matter of months, they lived for years and years and years. We can do our best as providers, and that's what we should. But the life and the prognosis is not, let's put it this way. Life is not a privilege to be taken away by a physician. And so I don't like that when a patient comes and tells me, oh, my doctor tells me I have 6 months to live, I have 2 years to live, I have 1 year to live. Sure enough, 90% of these patients realize that after they start the treatment with us, that odd is not there anymore because they pass it. So, thank you again for listening to all these stories, but I have so much to say. I mean, we're working on a documentary that hopefully that can come out and will include many of these patients' stories and how I got to be privileged as I am now. I learn from my patients. So when I treat a patient, I observe. And I've had many patients that I have treated many, many years ago. And I remember what they told me. They said, if I don't survive, please learn something from me to apply to the next person. And I made that commitment to do that. And so when a patient comes to see me now, they don't know what's behind it. There are a lot of lives and a lot of trials that has resulted to what they get in my treatment, in my clinic as far as treatment. And they have better results. So you heard the story of Julie Erdo. I remember she had masses in her brain, so much so that you couldn't count, numerous. And I remember that the MRI was done and she was sent to be operated on, and I get a text message She got some treatments from me during this time, like a month. I get a text message from Chris Duma, the head of the brain tumor program at Hoag Hospital. He's a friend of mine. And he says, man, you're making me bankrupted now. You're taking away the business. There's nothing there. He opens the brain and almost everything was gone. So this, again, comes with a sense of connection with the patient and understanding that treatment of cancer is not treating cells, and you gotta treat the person with cancer. So I should be amongst one of the people that thank you as my patients to teach me so much. All right, let's talk a little bit about science if you want to get bored. I've never been a performance dancer, but I need the microphone. Okay. All right. Some objectives outlined. So clarifying some misconceptions about integrative oncology. Integrative oncology is considered a sort of a field of medicine that is somehow undefined, meaning that some people say integrative medicine is just integrating everything, some herbs and supplements and natural compounds. That's not integrative oncology. Integrative oncology in our care, in our clinic, is basically providing the treatments that are least toxic and most effective. Meaning that if a treatment is toxic, we're not using it. If a treatment is not effective, we're not using it. So we have to find a treatment that is non-toxic and yet very effective. That's the philosophy of our care. Now think about that philosophy and think about the philosophy of just what I shared with you. Third cause of death in the United States. I was in the FDA 2013, I think. I was at the FDA in 2013, and there was a workshop. So So there was a workshop at the FDA, and the head of the drug division department, his name was Douglas Throckmorton, I believe. So he was giving a lecture proudly about how the FDA is controlling the drug development and is in charge of making sure that every drug that comes to the market is safe and effective, right? And so he was very proud about what they were doing. He was very pleased about the results of their mission. And so as he was saying that we make sure that every drug is safe and effective, I raised my hand. And I said, I have a question. And he said, what's your name? And I said, David Smith. So he said, what's your question? I said, you guys just approved a drug called Stivarga. It was approved in November 2013 as a third line for colorectal cancer, making his job difficult to track me. And I said this drug was approved based on an accelerated pathway through the FDA for expedited commercialization for colorectal cancer with a study that, based on a study that showed only 0.4% efficacy. Let me just try to stand here. Maybe if I don't move this works better. I said, you guys approved the drug. Okay. Okay, sit down. Calm down. I know you love me, right? So 0.4% efficacy. And I swear to God, I didn't do anything this time. Okay. The drug was approved based on a study that showed that it was effective only in 0.4% of patients, meaning that you have to treat 1,000 patients so that 4 of them would respond. Such an efficacy, 0.4%, and the placebo was 0.2%. Okay. Yet the toxicity of the drug was 40% life-threatening toxicity. And the drug gets approved through accelerated pathway, very expensive drug. I've yet to see one person uses this drug and doesn't die immediately. I mean, it kills you right away. And I said, how did you approve this drug, right? And he says, I always tell my staff not to approve these toxic placebos. This was the first time that I heard the word toxic placebos from an F drug division head, meaning that they're admitting that what they're approving not only doesn't work as a sugar pill, but also it's toxic. So imagine that as a comparison to our philosophy in our clinic, which is least toxic and most effective treatments. So that's why we're focusing on the philosophy, how you treat the patient, what is the style of care. I have medical students here in the audience, and his name is Ryan. He's working on a journey of patients who he interviews in my clinic. He was supposed to come and learn medicine from me. Oh, I know. So, she needs something. Sorry. Yeah, that's my daughter. So that's the problem with eye watches. They catch you everywhere. Where was I? Yeah, so he's working on a journey, on a journal of journeys of the patients in my clinic. And he was supposed to learn about medicine, and now he's learning more about humanity, about I let him talk about his journal, but it's very interesting. And the documentary that we're working on, again, goes back to how you treat a patient, not the disease. Anyways, next one, please. See, you don't even have control over what you're talking about. Okay, this is the guy who's practicing in the box. Frank doesn't like this slide because I embarrass all the oncologists that I give lectures everywhere I go. I went to one of these hospitals, and these oncologists are sitting there, and they said, "This is you." And they look at me like, oh. So Frank is my fixer, meaning that tries to modify a little bit my behavior. I don't know if it's successful or not, but I try to usually outspeak. Anyway, so I still have this slide, sorry. So, I didn't say next, what happened? I wanted to, no, I'm just kidding. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about cost of oncology care. It's about $1.5 to $2 million per person. So when you're diagnosed with cancer, you have a price tag of about $2 million per person that pharmaceutical companies make. Pretty much by killing you, right? Because as we know, 4% success, right? We have 1.5 million new incidences of cancer in the United States alone every year. And 500,000 of them every year die. Every 30 seconds, one person with cancer dies. Used to be the second cause of death, now it's first. Okay. Next. These are a summary of National Cancer Institute. Let me share with you the story I had with National Cancer Institute. It's funny. So I went to National Cancer Institute 2012, I think. And I went there and I said, well, you know, when you find a cure for cancer, you're so proud of yourself. So you want everybody to know, right? So I went there and I said, I got a cure for cancer. And I was expecting a red carpet. Didn't happen. So the chair of oncology comes and he looks at me and he says, I don't believe this. I said, okay. You want to look at the cases? And he says, yeah, sure. But before that, let's give us a lecture. I've heard you're a good presenter. I said, okay, we'll give you a lecture. So they brought all their scientists in the room. And I was sort of uncomfortable. I said, these guys know everything I do. So it would be a hard lecture for me. So I go there and I start talking with the same, mode of talking, not too fast. And then I'm looking at these guys and I'm talking about epigenetics and how DNA functions and how these genes open up and da-da-da. And I'm looking at the eyes and their eyes are just like that. They're looking at each other with a very open eye. And I'm like, what's wrong with these? Do they have Graves' disease? What is this? Oh, their eyes are like that. And so I'm just looking at them, and then the OCAM, he raised his hand and he said, Dr. Nezami, can you go a little bit slower? Because we can't understand what you're saying. I said, oh. These guys are supposed to be the gurus in the oncology world in National Cancer Institute. So anyways, they hired 3, by the way, I had the same feeling when I was watching your lecture guide at UCI. My eyes were like that, so it's not just me. Anyways, so they hired 3 oncology consulting groups, and they went over all the cases that I had treated. And they didn't believe anything I said, or my patient would say. Of course not. They're fakers, right? I paid Julie to come and talk today, right? They're actors. So they didn't believe anything I said. So they went after raw material, raw tissue, raw images, everything. And after 6 years of review, I got a letter, finally, from National Cancer Institute that says, Dr. Nezami, we reviewed all the cases and all 3 oncology consultant groups approved your treatment to be the novel treatment of cancer. So I said, wow, that's great. All of them approved that this is a novel treatment for cancer. So can we work together? Yeah, sure, we can work with you. We want 50% of your patents. I said, just because you're a National Cancer Institute, right? You haven't done anything. You just want to give an approval for a treatment I have developed over 15 years. Anyways, that didn't go a long way. But some people tell me, you should have done that. And I have a problem with partnering somebody with a different culture and philosophy. If it's about money, if it's about finances, if it's about my patents, I have no problem. But when it comes to somebody who is culturally in a different place, they're not looking at the same mission that I am. So far, I don't have any partners, as you can imagine. I don't. My only partners are my patients. So that's a little bit the story of National Cancer Institute. But this is the National Cancer Institute's list of so-called alternative therapies or natural therapies that they recommend. None of them is anything close to what we do in our clinic. Next one. You don't need to, I am. Next one. This is the letter that I got after 6 years of review, 2015. Yeah. So it says, thank you for submitting cases to the National Cancer Institute Best Case Series protocol. The case review process has been completed. Per protocol guidelines, we are pleased to inform you that our 3 external reviewers have all recommended follow-up research on your alternative approach to treatment of cancer termed epigenetic treatment. Thank you. Next one. Next one. Okay, we talked a little bit about epigenetic plasticity and differentiation, multi-targeted epigenetic therapy. Next one. Okay, so it's non-toxic. Okay, talking about quality of life, this is very important. Again, going back to the model of treating a human versus treating a mice. When you're treating a mice, you don't ask the mice, what is your goal of treatment with cancer? You inject cancer cells to the mice. She's gonna laugh again. She runs a lot of research in the mice. So you put the cancer cells in the mice and then you treat the mice, whatever you do, because you're trying to treat the tumor, right? You don't ask the mice, what is your goal of treatment? Or when you're doing that in the lab, nobody. But when you're treating a patient with cancer, one of the most critical questions that has to be discussed between the provider and the patient is quality of life. What are you looking for in a treatment? Are you looking for a treatment that makes you damn sick, you cannot move, you'll be bedridden, gonna lose your hair and throw up all the time, so that you get some tumor shrinkage, but you're gonna die in the same amount of time? I guess a patient would say no. But this frank discussion never happens between the provider and the patient. They never ask. They did a survey in patients with ovarian cancer. This was published 3 years ago at ASCO. They did a survey on ovarian cancer patients. And they were asked, which one you want more? Quality of life or living longer? And most of them, about 70% of the patients responded, I want a better quality of life, not more quantity of suffering. So that's a question that has to be asked when you're treating these patients. And nobody does that. They start them, and they treat them like mice. You got this tumor, this is the treatment, we're gonna inject it to you. And the quality of life is something that's always missed because they know the patient that I just give you an example, Eric, 32-year-old with testicular cancer, this guy died in 4 months miserably because they tried so much of chemotherapy agents that could bring an elephant down. Okay, next one. Much. Okay. No, it's okay. It's okay. All right. So, history of epigenetics. Epigenetic word was a terminology used by Apostle, not Dr. Nezami. And in 1940, Conor Waddington had a better description of what chemical reaction happens in the genes that is undescribable, but by genetic alterations, and they call it epigenetics. So epigenetic means above genes. So I give you a very interesting example. I'm good in examples, right? Okay, so there is this identical twins that one has cancer. Identical twins, obviously they have the same genes. So why is it that one gets cancer and the other one doesn't? If cancer was just a genetic disease, identical twins both should get cancer. And I have, by the way, a series of these identical twins in my practice. That one has cancer, the other one is healthy. So we know that it's not about just a gene, rather it's about genetic transcription. And so you can have a gene that's silent, and you can have a gene that is transcribed. That's the difference. Okay, so epigenetics is a chemical reaction that happens, technically speaking, in CPG islands that makes the DNA transcriptionally silent. And if I always give the example of my tie. So if this is the DNA, it becomes like this. Still a tie, but it doesn't function as a tie. So it's called heterochromatin, which is transcriptionally silent. So the DNA shuts down, it cannot transcribe itself. What our therapy does, it makes it like that. So the good news about epigenetics is that it's reversible. versus the genetics, if it's deletion or whatever it is, it's not reversible, meaning that you would carry on having the genetic abnormality and you will have your kids perhaps affected as well. That said, epigenetic aberrancies are also passed to the next generations. But the good news is that it's reversible. That's why our treatment works, is because it turns back the clock to the time that the insult has happened. Example. Okay, so I have many patients in my practice that they have lung cancer, and these patients have never smoked. So I asked them, and specifically they have the type of cancer, lung cancer, that only happens in the smokers. So it's a KRAS positive non-small cell lung cancer, only happens in the smokers. And I asked them, have you ever smoked? He says, no. So if it was a genetic cause for this disease, he had to be exposed to smoking. But when I asked them, did your parents smoke? They always say yes. So that's where the disease started, in the parents when they smoked. And that smoking caused epigenetic aberrancies in the DNA of the egg, and it was passed to the next generation. So calling it epigene, above gene, a philosophical term that was used by Apostle, translates very similar to what we're doing or calling karma. You do something bad and your kid pays the price. And that's exactly happens here. Whatever you do as far as exposure to carcinogens may not affect yourself, but it will definitely affect the next generation too. Now the good news is that it's reversible, meaning that when they get our therapy, the insult on the DNA level that happened in the prior generation reverses. Interesting, isn't it? So this is all science. How much of this science is applied in the clinics? Zero. Zero. You got cancer, we're gonna kill it. Well, that doesn't work. Okay. Next. The best example of epigenetic switches of on and off DNA transcription is caterpillar and butterfly. They have exactly the same genes, but the phenotype or the appearance of the animal is different. So during different stages of growth, the caterpillar becomes butterfly because the same genes in caterpillar changed their transcription as I just showed you in my tie. By switching on and off these genes, the caterpillar becomes butterfly or vice versa. So if caterpillar is a patient with cancer, after seeing Dr. Nezami, these caterpillars become butterfly. Magician, right? Next. 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 These are mostly for PhDs. We have only one in the room, so I'm not going to spend time. Next. Next. Okay, talking about natural compounds and how they can switch on and off the genes in mice. So identical mice as far as their genes. One group is exposed to a diet during their pregnancy that is enriched with these compounds that you see, metal donors in my back in the slide. Methylfolate, methionine, all those stuff. And the other one is not. So the offsprings of the group that during their pregnancy was fed with enriched natural compounds, you can see they're healthy, they're thin, and the other ones have diabetes. Okay. Because again, these genes are switched on and off based on environment, exposure in environment. And so, next one. Again, the yellow one is the diabetic one. genetically is the same, but was unlucky because the mother was fed with nutrients that were not metal donors. And so the expression of the tie, remember the tie? In one of them is transcriptionally silent, heterochromatin, and the other one is active. Next one. So epigenetics not only are involved with carcinogenesis and cancer, but also involved with metastasis and progression of the tumor. And so by switching on and off the genes, you can turn down the metastatic disease. Next one. Cancer is an adaptation to the environment. Again, I don't treat cancer as a disease. So just like I said, the body tries to adapt to damage by producing new cells and repair the areas of damage by cancer stem cells. And that's, again, it happens in very healthy people. So they're trying to adapt to an environment that's full of carcinogens. And so we'll talk about, for example, BRCA gene. You know that if women are diagnosed with BRCA gene, they have to remove their beautiful breasts and beautiful ovaries unnecessarily, because the BRCA gene is blamed to cause cancer in breast cancer, ovarian cancer, and many other types. So when I give lectures, I always ask the audience, can you remove your brain? Can you remove your stomach? Can you remove your pancreas? Nobody can remove those organs. But the BRCA gene is involved with cancer on all these organs. So how can you do it's ridiculous, it's barbaric to ask a woman that, oh, you got a bad gene. You don't have cancer, you have bad genes. So let's remove your ovaries, make you infertile, and remove your breast because you got bad genes. But I guess Angelina Jolie like that. Anyways, so you don't have to do that. In our clinic, we have protocols that talk about preventive oncology. How can you prevent cancer in patients, in people, normal individuals who have high risk? So you can do screening, identify these epigenetic aberrancies, and just like BRCA gene, as I explained. And you don't have to remove your breasts. You can use very simple interventions that augment the genes that are superior to BRCA. It's called P10. Next one. Yeah, again, this is a BRCA gene slide. So the Myriad lab had the patents on the test for BRCA gene mutation. It got expired. But anyways, when somebody's tested for BRCA gene, you identify who's at risk just based on the genetic malformation. But remember what I said, it's not about mutation. You can have just aberrancies in transcription. So you can have an absolutely normal looking BRCA gene, but yet completely dysfunctional. So it's not about the looks, it's about the deeds. It's about what the gene does. And as I said, in BRCA gene, I have many patients who have normal BRCA gene. Looking at them, they're normal, they don't have mutation, but they're silent, they cannot function. Next one. Next one. Next one. Why do I have these slides anyways? I can talk on my own. Next one. Okay, customized recommendations. So when a patient comes to see us, the first thing we do is that we get a molecular profiling of the tumor and we identify actionable targets. Every patient receives different protocol and treatment based on that. So if I have 10 different patients with breast cancer, each of them gets a different treatment, and the treatment is adaptive to findings. That's why it takes so much time to analyze these testings and approach these patients. Instead of saying, oh, you got breast cancer, this is the treatment for you. I had a patient with breast cancer in Washington State, and she was such a nice lady, she still is. So she came to see me and she had started chemotherapy and was very happy about the fact that chemotherapy has worked and the tumor has shrunk. And I gave her an example. I said, if I walk between this wall and that wall, or a window over there, it may take me 1 minute by a slow walk. That's if you don't do anything. meaning that this is your time of diagnosis, that's the time of death. Cancer takes away your life at one point. You haven't done anything, it grows by itself. I have 80 or 90-year-old ladies that come to my office and they have very huge breast masses. When I ask them, she says, I've had this for the last 15 to 20 years. 15 to 20 years with breast cancer. Yeah, it takes 15 years from going here to getting there. Now, if you do chemotherapy, this is what's going to happen. You stop as soon as you start the chemo. Oh, that's great. The first impression is that I'm not hitting the wall because I just stopped. I'm not hitting the crashing point. I'll survive. Until you run. Meaning that the first instance, when you didn't do anything, you have a slow walk. The second instance is stop and then run. And the running is because you just aggravated the stem cells to cause more disease. So metastatic disease that causes the patient to die is a process that is aggravated by using cytotoxic therapies. I've published this. So what's the point of using chemotherapy and then dying faster? But again, that's how it works. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. These are some studies, very fascinating. We did at MD Anderson with our therapy working on ovarian cancer. And as you can see, at certain dosages of the compounds we use, the inhibition of the migration, like the migration of these cancer cells stops. And I let our PhDs work on the molecular mechanistics. Next one. Okay, this is a breast cancer cell line that was exposed to chemotherapy. Third line, see how fascinating it works, almost none. And then this is our therapy. Comparison between chemotherapy and our therapy. I mean, the guy in Diatech Laboratory, which ran this test in 2012 for me, called me. And he says, excuse me? He said, I swear to God, this is how he was talking. I said, Dr. Gary, what's wrong with you today? And he said, I cannot tell you what I see. I said, what do you see? He said, I've never seen this before. No, literally, he was speechless. He couldn't talk because, as you can see, chemotherapy affects our kinetic units of apoptosis. We can say of 4, and that's called resistant, complete, ineffective. And then our therapy, just a long line close to it, is 38. So it's almost 10 times more effective than the most effective chemotherapy. Next one. These are cases. If you guys, I want to go, I'll show you just some pictures, but literally I don't want to go through all. You guys are all your own cases. Next one. And this is a patient who came to see me and about 5 years ago. When, I get a lot of patients, people of faith in my practice. And I remember there was an NIH doctor who came to see me, and he was just shaking his head. When they come and see these results, they almost get out of control. And he came and he said, I said, what are you saying? He said, what are you mumbling? He said, so he saw a couple of people that were paralyzed, and they all of a sudden started to walk. And then apparently he was Christian, and apparently his dad was a pastor. So when he saw all these things, he came to my clinic and said, you baptized me. I said, okay. And then he said, are Christians responding better than the other religions to your treatment? Because I think you do something with their brain, and you take away the cancer. He was thinking like I'm doing what Jesus was doing. And I said, no, I swear to God, I don't talk about religion in my clinic. And so anyways, this lady came by, and again, just like many of the other people of faith, she was very faithful. And she had this mass in her breast, and in a matter of 5 days, this cancer disappeared. And so I touched it the first day. It was coming out of the breast. It was so solid and tense and big. And 5 days later, as I'm doing the treatment, she says, she comes and she says, "Doctor, the cancer went away." And I said, "Oh, I know, you're one of those." And I thought, she just thinks that, because I'm Jesus, I just took the cancer away or something like that. I said, "I know." She said, "No, I'm serious. It went away." And I said, "Okay, I know. She said, "No, please examine me." I said, "Okay." So I touched the breast, and I can't find it. And I'm like, "God, this was here. I remember I touched it, it was here." And I said, maybe it has gone inside, so it's not outside anymore, it has gone inside. So I didn't rely on my judgment. We did the scans and MRIs and everything, completely gone. 5 days. This lady turned out to be BRCA positive breast cancer patient, refused chemotherapy, never received one, just our therapy. As we speak, it's 8 years she's cancer free. By the way, she got ovarian cancer at 1.2, and she came, and again I treated her the same way and without chemotherapy, and she's cancer free. Now, this is the mass that you can see in the ultrasound. Next. This is the report that, if you read it, it just says that there is no sign of cancer in the biopsy-proven area, and with the exclamation. Next one. This is her. Next one. Next one. 67-year-old at the time. He's 77 now. 10 years. My patient came with a stage 4 prostate cancer. Couldn't walk. I remember the first day I saw him. He was like this. Could not walk. 3 days after the treatment, the pain goes away. 1 month after the treatment, no sign of cancer. And I can show you this person has been alive since 10 years ago, cancer-free with my treatment alone. No surgery, no radiation, no hormone therapy, no chemotherapy, nothing. And the only time I see him is on Christmas time. He's now very old, 77 years old, but very healthy and active. He was a farmer in Fresno. He comes and brings me gifts on Christmas and whatnot. Next. Again, but we re-biopsied it, gone. Next. This was an 83-year-old I treated again. Next one. This is her, next one. 7 treatments. So the duration of the treatment to make that change, meaning that how long does a patient need to just pass the survival? Meaning that if you give me 1 week to treat a patient, I guarantee you this patient most likely will pass their expected survival. 1 week. This is a 7-day treatment. Next one. Circulatory tumor cell assay by Quest measures how many circulating tumor cells you have in 7.5 cc of blood. Very prognostic. It tells you how long the patient is surviving. So in this patient, as you can see, she had 24. 24. Anything more than 5 correlates with 5 months of survival. She had 24, so pretty much she's walking on a minefield, meaning that her expected survival are counted in days. Next one. 0. And if you look at the dates, April 20th, 2011, I was much younger back then, but it's still pretty good. So 24 cells disappeared in a matter of just 7 treatments. Next one. Clear scan, non-specific findings. They couldn't find the cancer anymore. Next one. Next one. This is a lady, this slide I think was prepared for geriatrics. It's all older lady. Anyways, this lady came by with stage 4 malignant melanoma. If you have anybody less than 18, please leave the room. No, I'm just kidding. So it's going to be a picture of her melanoma disease in the back. Next one. You can see the cancer all over her back and buttock. These are not infection, these are melanoma, okay? I saw her on a Monday. This is a picture that I took on Monday, okay? Next one. This is Friday. Just 5 days of treatment, cleared. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next. Next. Tumor markers. Another patient with stage 4 breast cancer. She was referred by Dr. Taguchi, one of my very good friends. She's an oncologist that sends patients, and so this patient had failed many treatments, and finally, Dr. Nezami is the last resort. So she comes, and she was on a wheelchair, again, all these wheelchair patients. And after a few weeks of treatment, this is what happens with tumor markers. Look, 1,333, 145, next. Next. Another tumor marker, 3,500 something, and then 233. By the way, it came down to normal range, so pretty much she went to complete remission. There was no sign of cancer in her body. She had, you'll see the scan in a minute. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Next one. Very good drop in HER2 levels. There was a study that was published, I think about 5 years ago, that showed the effects of extra virgin, has to be extra virgin by the way, not just virgin, extra virgin, olive oil, compared to Herceptin. And the results show that HER2 positive breast cancer responds to extra virgin olive oil as good as Herceptin. Okay, so I gave her some extra virgin olive oil, right? Next one. Next one. This is the MRI of the base of the skull when she had leptomeningeal disease. The survival of these patients is less than 1 month. So if a patient has leptomeningeal disease, they're gonna die generally in less than 1 month. And 3 months later with treatment, as you can see, the MRI is much better. Next one. Look at the scan. This one is the scan before I started her on the treatment. You pretty much see the entire anatomy of the bones. Anything dark you see is cancer, except kidneys and bladder and brain. This one, completely gone. There is no sign of cancer. 3 months, yeah. So same story, she attended the wedding of her daughter and brought her grandkids when they were born in my office. Amazing. Next one.
Well, I didn't know I was going to have to follow Dr. Nezami, or I would have said no. But in the summer of 2013, I was driving my son to Reno playing a volleyball tournament because all my kids and my wife are in the volleyball world. And my son now is 6'10", 260. I tried to get him in the football world, but he didn't like it. But on that drive up, I got a call from my wife, and she was hysterical and full of fear. And she said, Brian, they found a tumor in Emma, in her hip. And Emma at the time was on the 15-year-old national team in volleyball. She's 6'1", beautiful, incredible shape. And I just couldn't believe it. I said, what do you mean? And we knew she had had some pain in her hip, so we got an MRI, and they found this massive tumor. And in the process of that, as a father, when you get a call like that, or as a husband, or as a wife, or someone that's responsible for that person, it's just devastating and debilitating. And so we didn't know what to do, called some friends. I happen to know a lot of physicians because of my life, and we ended up at Cedars-Sinai and immediately started chemo. And unfortunately, as I found out later when we met with Dr. Nezami, that and when I asked the physician, I said, how do you know that's going to work? Like, that it has a possibility to work? And he says, we don't. He's like, those are just the 4 that we give in this situation. And I said, well, you there's not a test you can give her to see if she's going to respond. And the physician says, well, those tests do exist, but we don't use them. And it was just harrowing to me, because to think that you give that, we did a 6 or 7 month round of chemo, and it was diffuse in her pelvis and in her lungs, so she was stage 4 and at diagnosis. And in the process of that, to find out when we met with Dr. Nezami down the road that those 3 of those weren't going to work was just tragic. And so in the process of her getting that, we couldn't do the surgery because it was diffuse in her pelvis, so we got set up to do radiation. And the process of that, we found another physician that we tried, it didn't work. And by the time I found Dr. Nezami, Emma was in really bad shape. And that started our friendship, and the process over a year and a half where he was very helpful to us. Unfortunately, we found him too late, and Emma passed away. But he was so helpful and such a detective on trying to find a solution for her that he earned a lot of my respect and love. And 8 months to the day almost when Emma passed away, my wife was complaining about her neck. She had a little node on her neck. And I said, well, let's go get that checked out. And so she goes in to get checked out. And the physician says, yeah, well, we've got something there. We'll take it out and biopsy it. So they take it out. And he actually asked her, like, what happened 8 months ago? Well, 8 months to the day was when Emma passed away. He said, well, you've got lymphoma, and chances are your immune system just crashed because of what happened to your daughter. And so I said, Jenny, what do you want to do? And she said, well, we got to go see Nezami. And so we did. And within a couple months, she was in remission, doing great. And then a year or so later, unfortunately, it came back, and that was 2 years ago. And so for the last 2 years, my wife has been under Dr. Nezami's care. At the same time, she's a beach volleyball coach. She's playing on the beach. She's getting her master's and doing her life. And it's just phenomenal to me. And it still racks my brain because I spent so much time in the doctor's clinic with my daughter, how people would come in, literally get treatment and get better. I mean, it just racked my, I'm like, is this possible? Unbelievable. So her quality of life and what she's able to do now and the lives that she's affecting is just phenomenal and unbelievable. As you can see, she's gorgeous and vital and doing great. And so I really believe this treatment should be available to more people. And they deserve to have tests run that are cutting edge and that give them the best possibility and the best chance of an outcome. So thank you for supporting it. It's incredible financially, emotionally, spiritually, mentally, what it does to a family to get a diagnosis and to be put in a situation where everything is tested. And to have a place like Dr. Nezami's is really a community and a family that does the best thing they can do for a patient. That's all you can ask for. So